Welcome everybody to this podcast with a working title of Foundational Recipes for Fundraisers and Digital Marketers. This is episode 1, Ingredients, the Soffritto. All right, we're rolling. Let's do it. I think what's important here is to understand that we're not trying to boil the ocean, right? We've done this revenue engine before. We've built the framework. We've tested into it. And we've driven extraordinary revenue growth and brand relevancy because of it. So this is a series about the how, right? How we did it. And we're going to be giving away those frameworks for each of our conversations to people to actually go and implement it. And then we'll look to process, right? The processes that gave us more budget fluidity so we could switch channels to scale at greater velocity. And we'll help you focus your resources, focus the internal culture and the hiring and the considerations across digital to really put you in position to win, especially at end of year. So join us on this journey and let us share the experience together. So right now, people are putting in their headphones and listening to an idea that we're exploring. The idea is to help nonprofit organizations, both big and small, understand how to drive results through digital marketing, right? How do we connect brand with performance marketing and across different audience segments to drive not just revenue growth, but to drive growth in actions taken, to drive better, more memorable experiences digitally for the donor or the prospect. And so Kiana and I are going to be talking to digital savants, fundraising directors, heads of philanthropy, brand leaders from both inside and outside the industry, trying to uncover the good, the bad, the ugly, the untold stories behind how they're growing their digital and their data muscle to deliver on their missions, right? And what tools and platforms and frameworks they've built to really deliver exceptional results. So I alluded just earlier, but I've got my co-pilot joining me today, Kiana. Thanks for jumping into this with me. Why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm happy to be here. I think, I work at Delve, who's kind of working to sponsor this, and we go way back, Tobes. It's been a long relationship. We both worked together and collaborated on UNICEF, and I think we both have this deep understanding of nonprofits. My current position, I focus on technology. I work with agencies, brands. I mean, I've seen it all at this point, licensing our technology and being really in the weeds with just how to make this stuff work. Because most of the time it's a lot more complicated. And if you try to Google an answer, a lot of the times those answers may not even be true on the internet, but that's what gets published. So I think what we're doing here today is really special because we're making it simple. We're going to break it down into the framework that we've kind of developed over time, and then hopefully use that to go into the weeds in future sessions and understand in a lot more granularity how brands can take action on the different things that we're kind of going through and discussing, and also how to make results a constant outcome of their actions without getting caught in the mess of trying to make everything perfect or trying to lose focus maybe, or going around the wrong ways. But appreciate being here and looking forward to kind of unpacking this with you.
Amazing. And I would also sort of speak personally and say that I've spent many years in startups and would admit that I was always drawn to talking and thinking in terms of tactics. And it took me a while to realize that actually, if we can start to talk in terms of frameworks, it allows us to build an engine around how we go to market. As Kiana mentioned, I spent 5.5 years at UNICEF, building the digital revenue engine, building the digital marketing and the operations engine, specifically in the US market. I hired a fantastic team during that time. Kiana and I worked together, and we had some incredible partners along for the ride, and they helped us deliver the huge revenue gains. We also saw tremendous efficiency gains and ROI benefits. And I think at some point, Kiana, you and I should get into a conversation about what that distinction actually looks like. But for me, the bottom line was we very successfully connected the consumer, or in our case, the donor, but at multiple moments across their purchase journey, their donor journey with us. And we did it fundamentally with personalized content. And so I think it's in due course, we'll break down that approach right into a framework so we can help organizations really mature their digital marketing and their digital revenue capabilities even from a standing start. I think our wish or our hope certainly is that these conversations will uncover the stories around building these engines, perhaps sparking ideas around orchestrating different campaigns, how we build teams and culture, and hear people's experiences, different experiences. And maybe we turn it into a cheat sheet, maybe we turn it into a framework, but ultimately I think you and I both are aligned on it's got to be helpful, it's got to be educational, and we want to really help the listener drive their missions, which is maybe a good segue, John, if we jump in. So the framework that I think we're going to touch on today is pretty high level. I think it's something that we've all seen around who and what and where and how and why. If we think in terms of circles, for those of us who are driving and not looking at a screen, surrounding everything, we start with the why, right? So the mission, the raison d'etre. Kiana, tell us a little bit more about the why.
Yeah. Hopefully this helps inspire people, but at the end of the day, why are you here? Why do you exist? You know, as a non-for-profit, you have a mission, and ultimately what that is your cause. With UNICEF, it exists to help children. And you can kind of think of that product or service that UNICEF brings to the market is giving people a way to support children who need it. Non-for-profit's such a feel-good. You can think of it almost as like you're giving people not only the opportunity to help out, but you also give people a good feeling. You also can see it almost as like a tangible way to align your own values. There's all of these ways that you can support and give help and still kind of contribute to a cause that you care about through a means that kind of exists in multiple ways. You can give specifically to displaced children, you could give to a water cause, like there's just a lot of different areas. So I think the why, it surrounds everything else that you do. You really have to kind of picture marketing through that lens and to kind of push it forward. And really what this series will hopefully uncover is the how. And the how, of course, from digital marketing, because there's so many hows of, you know, how you actually implement using donation funds and all of that. That's not what we're here to talk about, though. We're here to talk about how do you kind of drive your cause forward through digital marketing. And so if we look deeper, we can start to unpack all of these different factors. And it's really 4 key factors. Team, which is going to break into the goals and KPIs you're giving your team, the bodies that you have working and creating kind of the full-blown plan, collaboration across your teams, resources, how you're kind of providing them with the right budgets, how you're breaking things out to them, and various processes that work in between. So I know, as you mentioned, Tobes, like you had a really strong team. We used to work all kinds of, you know, crazy last minute crises, but your team was always so fast to get to the point. And I feel like everyone had the value and they shared kind of the why of why they're there, why they're doing the work, but also it's like that mission statement almost, and the cause was relevant. I'm curious, Tobes, what do you feel like made the UNICEF team stand apart from other teams? And what really brought you guys together, your collaboration, and how do you think it impacted the recent fundraising efforts?
I think we had this fundamental connection as marketers, as storytellers. Take Ukraine, for example, where we've seen tremendous donor support and engagement with UNICEF, despite the sea of peer organizations gathering together to fundraise for this emergency event. For me, what we were able to do with the technology and the tools and the data and all of the learnings that we had previously run as experiments is we were able to bring those to the fore at that moment for Ukraine. And then it just comes about scale and predictability. It also, for me, just comes back, right, it comes back to stories. And how are we leveraging that data? What insights are we drawing? And then what audiences, what personas are we pulling into it? Because stories are going to hit at many, many different levels. And there are so many different segments of our audience that we were able to engage with, right, for Ukraine. It wasn't just people that had Googled Ukraine. And I think, stories have to be memorable, right? They simplify complex concepts. And a lot of the work that UNICEF does out there is incredibly complex. And on our team, right, of both brand marketers, performance marketers, and the content marketers, and we were able to bring in people to train, if you like, subject matter experts to really communicate cross-functionally, to draw on those insights, to be able to tell those stories. And as a result, right, I just want to bring everything back to what's the sort of outcome here. We were able to, in many ways, unite our audience, right, our total addressable market around the value that UNICEF were bringing ultimately to the children on the ground, right? And we were able to talk about value both explicitly and implied.
So starting with team, that's key, it's pivotal, it drives everything. And going into the resources that you're giving your team, one of those things in digital marketing is tech. With so much clutter in the tech space, because there's just so many options, which is great in many ways, because there's certain things that might be perfect for your brand and kind of your team that makes sense. There's also kind of those key winners, those major stakeholders and those top providers of tech that you can start to break into what are the different stages you start to engage with them. For example, every business has a CRM system. If you don't have a CRM system, something's missing. And starting with something as simple as that from a technology perspective can be a really hard decision. It can be an even harder decision to determine when you need to migrate to a new system because either you've matured more, you need more features, whatever it is. The technology space is wide and far. And so having so many options can make it hard. And I'm hopeful that in future sessions, as we get into the weeds, we can uncover, MarTech versus ad tech. What are the different options? What makes sense at different stages in your maturity level? As of recent, I've been hearing the term mad tech, which is like the combination of marketing and advertising technology. So more to learn on that front. You have the cloud space of things. The entire world is shifting into mobile. So there's a lot to talk about when it comes to the app space and how you can engage with your customers on the device that I'm sure most of us check first thing in the morning, check right before bed, and we pretty much have it glued to our hips at all times during the day. When you go into the next stage of that, you get into activation, right? So we have the team that's sitting here established. We have the technology that's enabling the team, and now we can take action. And so everything from media, paid, organic, both of those are digital. You have your website, how customers engage with your website testing, all of the different kind of customer journey pieces that they're experiencing of your brand from a digital perspective. You have creative, which I remember like one of the things we were always very cautious of was ad fatigue. I know personally, some brands, if you don't have a frequency cap on, if you don't have certain things set across just all of your channels, because even though one tool or maybe one team does one channel like email, there's all of the other teams doing everything else. And if you're not in unison as a group, it almost can leave a bad taste instead of a good taste because the message is getting hit for so much.
I would say that two unifying factors. One was around unifying us as a team, being storytellers. The other one is we were leading very strongly with experimentation, right? So we led with that over any elaborate planning. We led with data over intuition. And that was always a really challenging conversation, especially at the beginning, around where does creativity sit within this iterative design process that we were encouraging, right? And the conversation here really needs to be around, let's focus on what matters, focusing on what moves the needle, getting some early wins in, and then really focusing, especially at the beginning, on that which can be measured, right? That's it. And I think encouraging everybody else around that philosophy, having a Google Doc, which is open to everybody to participate in, drop your test ideas in here, right? It's not that this is being run in a silo. It's we have to prioritize from a technology standpoint, from a data standpoint. What do we go to market with first? Where's that greater win? And then we can start to slice and dice. Jana, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, testing is really important. And I think that's another thing, maybe as a caveat to introing this, is you have to have an open mind. If you go into digital with a closed mind and you're not willing to test, you don't advance. And those who are testing the most are the ones who kind of break ground the most. They find the most unique things. Super Bowl and the was it Coinbase, I think, that did the ad where it was just a QR code. And what, like 6 years ago, everyone hated QR codes. They were the dumbest thing in the world. And then COVID happened and QR codes became important. Being groundbreaking, being testing, taking risks has to happen. So activation wise, all of that leads right into what we're talking about next, which is data. And I think being daring, taking the risks and testing is important. It's also important to understand your data, and it's really important to understand the role data plays. You can't just look at data as maybe the only answers. It is the best place to start. It is what you want to hold as your source of truth. But sometimes if you're running certain medias, or if you're driving organic traffic, and you're not able to tie everything perfectly because walled gardens exist, privacy is the new frontier, everything's coming up. It's important to understand how you can use your data in the best way to inform your decisions, and then also understanding the storytelling piece and some of the foundations from this framework. So collection, measurement strategy. I know analysis and insights wise, I remember us doing on our weekly calls throughout the week, we just were pumping out insights constantly, just trying to get a better understanding of what we were doing. And so it's really important to kind of set data as a key point to what you're doing, and something that can always revert back to your strategy and helping to enable your team.
And it also maybe brings us full circle, if we can take one step into focusing on the customer, on the donor, right? I've seen dramatic changes in customer behavior, prospect, donor behavior, both during the pandemic and then post. Right? It's plenty of data out there now that shows that the customer expectation of brands is shifting. Right? There's a lot of evidence that suggests that showing a brand's purpose is a key reason for engaging. Right? But when you're talking about data, and yes, it needs to be pounced on and activated. I think one of the challenges that likely people will be having is it needs to be collected, it needs to be cleaned, it needs to be housed, and then insights need to be drawn from it, and then it needs to be actionable, right? So we should always be developing a better understanding of what our prospects, what our customers, what our donors want, and how they're making decisions across the entire funnel, right? Be it online and offline. I'd love to have another session with you where we're looking at online and offline and talking about activations there.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is data it leads to performance, it leads to all of these kind of results that you're driving for, but at the same time, it can also lead to efficiencies that maybe you didn't plan on, but they came throughout the process. Like, I remember when we were going through creative testing and we were looking at different images, and it became a question of like the content collection team was going out maybe to Syria, wherever it was, and they were asking us like, hey, what kind of images, what kind of video, what are you guys thinking? And it was like, we not only had we had this set of data to help us drive some specific things, but we also had all of these tests, to your point, from this like running docket of what we would love to do. And we were able to provide that to them and help drive what content they create, test that. And then in the future, when they're going for a new situation or whatever, a new country, wherever they're at, it helps us to cater that a little bit because we have some background knowledge. And so you save on costs, you have turnover kind of efficiencies within your new campaigns. And so all of that is breaking down the how. What needs to happen internally within your why you're doing this, the first thing that we can't stop talking about, because in everybody's world, this is the most important thing, is the people, the customers, the donors in our case, basically who we're trying to talk to. You need to successfully identify that target market. And it's not something that stays only once. It's something that evolves. It's something that expands. I remember for the longest time, we were looking at I think age groups, and it was like specific age groups were really popular, but then there were other age groups that we weren't hitting. I remember it was males on desktop. There were certain things that we knew always worked. But the big question was, because we had done such a good job of kind of the how in hitting those users, where do we go next? How do we expand next? What is the next segment that's going to push the needle a little bit further and make a huge difference in this year's end of year campaign? And so kind of over time, people can evolve and it grows, it becomes more. But at the root of it, if you're brand new to the space, you need to identify who that gold mine, who that starter customer is.
I'll give you an example of UNICEF and how we started to uncover that gold mine and increase our donor base. And we did it with the help of Google's 360 audiences, which sits, I think, within Google Analytics. So the goal was to more effectively reach prospects, prospective donors, and increase that donation revenue, and then frequency, right? We had, though, to get a better understanding of the type or types of content that prospects were engaging with on the site, for example, in order for us to meet those goals. And so because we linked our Analytics 360 and our Display Video 360 accounts, we were able to share audience, if you like, betwixt and between both of them. And so what that meant for the donor was that messaging was always relevant. It was always engaging. And what it meant for us was that it helped us identify and market only to audiences who were most likely to respond to our messaging. And to be honest with you, what it also meant was we stopped spending media dollars on audiences who were not going to donate or showed a propensity to donate. And the result of that kind of linkage was we delivered easily 10% year-on-year growth in donor acquisition, and at least a 40% increase on website conversion rate. I think we always need to be thinking about the narrative. Right? It goes back to storytelling, right? The emotional curve that we're taking people on. I think it's Google that call them micro moments, right? Moments matter, right? And they can be memorable if you make them so, especially when you put the user at the center of the story that you're telling them, right? Be it online, be it connected to offline, be it them seeing on through connected TV with a follow-up with a Gmail ad, etc. Whatever journey you're taking them on, the journey is absolutely critical, right? You're focused on them and their needs, and that is very explicit in their experience of the brand.
Right. Well, and that goes right into the next spot, right? Because the next thing you have to understand is the message. Right. What are you going to say to these people? Understanding the customer fuels your understanding of what to say to them. And it's done through market research, it's done through current testing, but ultimately also comes from data, which bring us back to, creative and like all the different messages we would try. And really the foundation, because it's your way of communicating to the world your why.
I wonder if you can remember, because I can't, the pillars that we came up with, that we started to segment our audiences by, because one of them was joyful, and I was like, why are we talking? Joyful's not a pillar. That's an emotion, and it was great because we went through this experiment where actually there was a very clear audience segment within our space that said, yes, if you lean into joyful, be it in terms of how you tell the story, in terms of the photo or the video that you're showing joy, that's huge. When you engage with UNICEF, when you become a donor, when we follow up and we say thank you, and we upsell you to become a monthly recurring donor, you are actively engaged. And how do we keep you actively engaged, right? And that's around the message, right? That message has to change depending on season, depending on your activity, depending on where we are as UNICEF in the world. But there's multiple layers to building a sort of messaging framework that taps the data, that taps the very different ad networks and how they all perform, and the technology that you leverage in order to do that. But there's a real sort of rich tapestry for us to get into there for sure. Amazing. Let's wrap it there, Kiana. This series focuses on the how of digital marketing. We'll be getting into the weeds for the tech, the activation, the people, the processes, looking at them from different stages of maturity and throughout the donor journey. So before we wrap, there's some cool jobs that came across my desk this week. One of them is at Greenpeace MENA, Middle East and North Africa. It's a newly developed regional hub that they've got. And I know that they're looking for a fundraising director in a newly formed role there. So hit me up if interesting. 2 roles in the SES marketing world of UNICEF. Their private sector fundraising strategy is replacing CRM systems, and I think it's about 21 different country offices with Salesforce. So 2 roles, individual contractors. Both posts are remote. One of them is in the Latin American and Caribbean region time zone, and then the second is within the East Asia and Pacific region time zone. And they are both 11.5-month contract roles. And then I'm hiring. I'm building out a revenue engine, and I need a performance marketer, and I'm building a product marketing team from scratch, and it needs a leader. So hit me up on any of the roles that I've just shared. And if this is a valuable segment, then we can do more of it next time.